Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here today, and I'd like to thank JB Weir for hosting this. It's terrific. Centre for Social Impact on a quarterly basis issues a literary review known as Knowledge Connect, and this one I'm the guest editor, and I wanted to ask, why do we even care about philanthropy? This time last year, Eleanor and Paul at UWA CSI did the knowledge review on the theme Impact over Intentions. But I wanted to take a different track, not to solve an issue so much as open a discussion and look at why philanthropy even matters. I mean, because compared to government funding, even the bulk of individual giving, philanthropic or planned giving is actually tiny. So why do we even care? I mean, yes, there's the power of the purse, but there's probably a little bit more than that. Over the past 10 or 15 years, we've seen the rise of the living donor. Those who've mostly made their money, some people have inherited it, but most people have made their own money, and they're choosing to give their money away while they're living, rather than waiting till they die through a will or bequest. This is a global phenomenon, but it's probably best illustrated here by the rise and growth of private ancillary funds, or PAFs, and indeed major gifts by individuals. This trend became prominent globally in 2006 when Warren Buffett made his a big donation to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But actually, as a result of the GFC, or the global financial crisis, governments all around the world are under pressure budgetary-wise, and they're starting to cut into funding for social services. At the same time, there's actually a bigger call on social services, through things like poverty and homelessness, but also through, for example, in Australia here, disaster funding. There's also greater community expectation, and all, rightly or wrongly, are expecting philanthropy to step up to the plate and fill in the gaps. And in doing so, philanthropy is gaining greater influence and leverage. Now, traditionally, this is not a subject that we really discuss, and certainly not openly. It's a sensitive issue. It's not something that individuals, particularly those that do have money, power and influence, like to even talk about. Yet we, in the wider community, particularly through the media, are fascinated by power and wealth. And because these are the people who are not only economically influential, but politically and actually socially influential. And let's face it, we all, including government, all want their philanthropic money for our charities, for causes we think are important, for general social cohesion. And so for philanthropy, as this profile and influence increases, so does scrutiny, which is uncomfortable. And while we talk about this, it's important to remember this is private money. In my review, I look at, because there's not a lot of literature on this, I look at a variety of things, and one of the things I look at is a video of a panel discussion in the States called Power and Light. And the panellists discuss, among other things, the issue of transparency. They note that in a 24/7 world, scrutiny and transparency is being demanded of everyone, and yet philanthropy remains strangely opaque. While most panellists thought that this anonymity was quite acceptable, even necessary, one did not. And this is particularly sensitive in Australia today because of the establishment of the Australian Charities and Non-Profit Commission, or the ACNC. I was in Sydney earlier this year, and I attended a dinner at which two philanthropists discussed this very issue. One made his money in finance and the other in resources. Both are well known at the top end of town, but not by the wider community at all. Neither are ostentatious. Both are unassuming and generous. Both actually fund in very similar cause areas. Both set up a PAF. Both told me 5 years ago that they wouldn't speak publicly about their giving. And yet, in the past 2 years, both of them have taken a leadership position and spoke publicly about their giving to encourage others. One believes that PAFs should be transparent, and the other believes they should not be transparent, they should be anonymous. And the reasons he gave were the same as those given in Power and Light. Firstly, family safety is a critical one for those people who have money. The second is some anonymity needed to allow people to fund in difficult areas where there are bad actors. As someone who's involved with women's shelters, for example, I really can relate to that. The third thing is the resultant. If you make contact details available, then you will invite an avalanche of grant requests which will raise the administration costs. And for many PAFs, they are family PAFs, and therefore they don't have the administrative wherewithal to handle that burden. And I think one other thing, as I said, this is private money. After paying tax in Australia, provided it's legal, it's up to the individual can spend money how they like it. Yes, you get a tax deduction if you give to a charity with DGR status. But you don't have to donate. It's a choice. And goodness knows there are plenty of other ways to get other tax-effective ways to spend your money. Most of which do not contribute to the community and which do not require you to put up your private contact details and your business details. So if we want major donors, if we want philanthropy and philanthropic foundations, we do have to retain a balance between that private and public. Of course, the big gorilla in all this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I use that term affectionately. But they do provide us with a way of thinking about and talking about a lot of these issues. Fascinatingly, in the review of letters in Knowledge Connect, Lisa Jordan argues that in spite of its size, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually really operates very like most family foundations. Tim Ogden points out that the Gates Foundation is most often criticised for not funding X. And that's because it followed all the advice given to all philanthropists everywhere that to make impact you have to find a focus. Just as an aside, in Melbourne a couple of years ago, Philanthropy Australia held an arts affinity group with the then Minister for the Arts and a number of arts, the heads of the arts peak bodies, with large Melbourne foundations. The large Melbourne foundations had taken the advice of the sector and had started to fund fewer organisations with larger grants over a couple of years. And yet they were copping flack. The result was a few very happy organisations doing a really good job, but an outcry by a whole host of arts organisations who weren't getting any funding at all. There's no right or wrong about this, but it's not easy, and it's particularly difficult for private individuals and private foundations. They struggle with that. In Wendy Scaife from QUT's review of Harrow and Jung's article, they ask, to whom is philanthropy accountable? And who holds it accountable? You know, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it files its IRS forms in the US, but really other than that, it's really only accountable to the board of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Many worry about this, given its size and influence. who contests the views of the board members? Of course, not everyone's worried. Diana Leet says that at a time when governments, business and the not-for-profit sector seem to increasingly speak the language of and values of the market, the capacity of philanthropy to provide alternative points of view may never be more important. In a demonstration of the great value of our philanthropists, Louise Walsh reviews the Mitchell Arts Review, led by philanthropist Harold Mitchell, and the ideas and suggestions contained therein. While Richard Branson, in his book Screw Business as Usual, calls on business leaders to take a wider responsibility for issues that affect everyone, that today business can and must deliver benefits to the people and the planet, as well as their shareholders. Richard Branson also demonstrates another very important and unique role of philanthropists, and that is the ability to build unconventional networks and coalitions to confront the global and social environmental issues that the globe faces to achieve large-scale change for the better. I hope you enjoy this edition of Knowledge Connect, and it gives you a sense of a fascinating group of people, the philanthropists, and why it matters. Thank you very much.